Whether it's the threat of nuclear war, the entire planet going to war, plagues that have swept through and caused a huge percentage of the world to get sick, or the biggest threat to mankind on the horizon, we're going to cover it all in today's most amazing top 10 list. Coming in number 10, we have World War II. This was supposed to be a quick war. Men who enlisted were told that it was probably going to be done in less than a year. Then 4 years later, they were still in the trenches trying to survive the onslaught of German artillery. This war became so massive that most of the world's superpowers were involved, and it stretched through Europe, Asia, Africa, and to the United States. As crazy as it sounds, if America didn't drop 2 bombs on Japan, then the war could have kept spreading. America dropping the bombs was the moment when things got way out of hand and everyone had to stop and look at the carnage around them and then start cleaning up. But there were many people around the world who thought that the Second World War could have led to the end of everything as we know it. I mean, if the war went the other way and the axis of evil was able to pull out the win, the world as we know it would have for sure ended. People would have still been alive, but it would have created a future that was way different from anything we have today. And guys, make sure that you hit that like button because it really helps us out. Coming at number 9, we have the Cold War. Probably the longest war that never shot a bullet. The Cold War was a stalemate between Russia and America, the ideals of communism and capitalism all against each other. 2 superpowers were basically giving each other the silent treatment and being passive aggressive for nearly 50 years. Like, just kiss and make up already. When you start to hear about this, it makes sense why there's still so much tension between Russia and America today. But how did this lead to the world almost ending? Well, because throughout most of the Cold War, both Russia and America had access to a stockpile of nuclear arms. The worry was that at any moment, one of them would launch a nuke at the other, and this would cause the other side to fire back and lead to a situation where nukes are flying back and forth through the sky until the planet was literally unlivable. Now, thankfully, this didn't happen, but there was a bunch of moments that were very sketchy, like the Cuban Missile Crisis, where America found out that Russia had been moving nukes into Cuba, which obviously was a huge problem because this would give Russia the edge in a nuclear attack. They would have had the capability to fire arms at America faster and from 2 locations. Coming in at number 8, we have a Y2K. This was 2012 before 2012. This was the first time in my life that people thought the world was going to end because of a year changing. The idea behind this was that when the new computer system switched over to the year 2000, this would cause them to glitch, and there would be massive power outages, computer failures, and digital virus outbreaks. This would cause everything electronic to break down. Planes would fall out of the sky, and the planet would fall into disarray for anyone who was depending on technology, which is the majority of us. Now, obviously, this didn't happen because we're all still here, and you can fix your computer by simply turning it off and on again, but you can understand why this would make people freak out. Think about if all our phones and the internet shut off out of nowhere. Most of us wouldn't be able to find a way around the city we live in. It would be chaos, and people would lose their minds. Except for all the people who decided to be naturalists. They would have been living in the woods, and they would be laughing so hard saying, "I told you so." Coming at number 7, we have 2012. This was where every person who had never seen a Mayan calendar came together and decided that the world was going to end because of something a culture wrote about a long time ago. This was such a big deal that there was a movie with John Cusack about the whole world exploding and pretty much everything coming to an end. Basically, people thought that right when the world flowed into the year 2012, there was going to be natural disaster after natural disaster. Everything that could go wrong would go wrong. It would start with massive storms all over the world with a mix of massive hail, lightning, and endless rain. This would be followed by earthquakes all over the world, and then every volcano we know would erupt at the same time. Now, this was something that people were so afraid of that many people around the world started building bunkers so they could have somewhere to survive this onslaught of natural disasters and make it to the other side of all of this chaos. But as we all know, nothing happened, and we lived to see another day. There are actually people who think the world could still come to an end in 2021 because the calendar was actually wrong. But we all made it through 2020, so I think we're all going to be fine. And coming in at number 6, we have the Black Plague. This is probably the most famous pandemic that has ever happened. This was back in the mid-1300s, and it took out so many people that it was a common belief that the Black Plague was a curse from God to cleanse humanity from the planet. This all started because of a lack of hygiene throughout most of Europe. This was because many people were throwing their excrement out into the streets, and there was no sort of sewage system for the lower class people. This combined with a serious rat problem led to disease being spread all throughout Europe, and if it didn't die down, this could have led to the end of the world as we know it, or at least it would have shifted the landscape of the world that we have today pretty drastically. We would all be speaking a different language entirely if the Black Plague never stopped. Coming in at number 5, we have the Spanish flu. Because we are currently in a pandemic, things could seem like they couldn't get any worse. While as bad as it sounds, things could be so much worse than they are right now. The Spanish flu was one of the worst pandemics that the world had ever seen. It infected around 500 million people, and this was back in the year 1918. Back then, that was almost a third of the world's population. Man, we have been busy getting people on this planet. In 100 years, we have quadrupled the amount of people that live here. How is there still enough space for all of us? Well, back to my point. This pandemic was looking like it could be a world ender because the crazy thing about the Spanish flu was the target demo that it infected. With COVID, it's mostly older people that have to worry about getting sick because they have a weaker immune system. But with the Spanish flu, it was the younger, healthier people that were at risk. It was people that were between the ages of 25 and 45 that were the highest risk of getting infected. If you have something that is taking out all the younger, healthier people, then after everything is said and done, you would only have old people left to rebuild the world and stop humanity from crumbling. Coming in at number 4, we have smallpox. Smallpox was one of the deadliest diseases that the planet has ever seen. For a long time, before we were able to cure it, it was one of the biggest things and one of the most feared. It would spread like crazy, and there was nothing to fight back against it. And for the Native American people, it did almost end the world for them. It was the First Nations people who felt the worst of it as it decimated their communities and allowed colonizers to move in and take over massive amounts of America. Now, many First Nations communities are still rebuilding, but there was a long time when things were in disarray and much worse than they are now. Coming in at number 3, we have Genghis Khan. Everywhere this guy went, people thought that he was the end of days. Now, he didn't almost end the world, but he did change the world forever, and if he didn't get sick, which brought an earlier end to his reign, he would have been able to conquer even more of the world. And this is a man who already had the largest empire known to man. Genghis Khan was such a force of destruction that people thought he was a curse sent from God, which goes in line with the fact that Genghis Khan thought that he was chosen by God to take over the world. You really need that kind of crazy confidence to pull off what he did. The reign of Genghis Khan also saw so many people leave the earth that the temperature of the earth actually dropped. I didn't even know that was possible. Coming at number 2, we have the 2019 asteroid. There's probably a few people watching this that have no idea about the 2019 asteroid. It came and went so fast a lot of people didn't hear about it. But there was an asteroid that was about the size of the Statue of Liberty that was moving at 15 miles a second. That's pretty fast if you ask me. And this thing came very close to Earth, like super close. This thing was actually 1/5 the distance of the moon. Now, stuff like this happens all the time. Space is an endless void with a whole bunch of junk, and sometimes that junk comes very close to our planet. But what made this one so much of a news story was the fact of how close it got, and that people at NASA didn't see it until 2 days after it already passed by the planet. This thing came and went and almost smashed into our planet, all before anyone saw it. If this thing had crashed into us, it would have been strong enough to destroy an entire city, which is a good time to say follow your dreams, because you never know when a space rock could come crashing into our planet without warning. And coming into the number 1 spot, we have climate change. I mean, this one hasn't happened yet, but it would seem that this one could end up being the next massive extinction event that is coming down the pipe. Bill Gates has said that it is possible for the human race to be able to overcome climate change, but it is going to be the hardest thing that we have ever done, and it's going to take the whole planet to come together to do it. For those of you who have been living under a rock and have no idea what climate change is, let me fill you in. We have been emitting too much carbon, and this is causing the planet to heat up and shift climates all over the world. At first, when I heard about this, I thought, well, that doesn't seem that bad. I love warm weather. This sounds more like a war on winter, and I can get behind that. Then I realized that this will cause massive forest fires all over the world, smog making air harder to breathe, and bugs that normally die off in the winter will continue to populate until spiders outnumber every human on the planet from 1,000,000 to 1. So we need to start doing something about this very soon. On the bright side, it would seem that many countries are getting behind this. Clean energy is the future, and America has made it their goal to have zero carbon emissions by the year 2050. And many other countries are following suit. Alright guys, that has been your list. I have been your host, Jay Durena, and until next time, keep enjoying this content.